missing. We're still tuning this up. First of all, safety moment. There is no real schedule for today, so if you hear the alarm, it's the real thing. So we just exit through here. Mike? You cannot be on the back. Okay. Move to the front. Any more detail about the safety or just yeah, so if there is any emergency, we follow the exit sign downstairs and leave the master point. Like to be outside in front of the hotel. I would like to thank everyone for being here. Made the trip from far or close, but it's great to see all the people joining us again. After last meeting that we had like this was in Calgary 2019, so glad to be back. I thought I'd start since we haven't seen each other for a long time, just to show you what the committee is. So I'm the chairperson. Beside me is Hans. That to fix that, he works for Total. He's in France, but unfortunately he was unable to be here. So between myself and David Gibson, we're gonna take the role of the program chair and try to manage the time and the presentation here. We've got Robert Wiley, which is the treasurer, Tim Patron with security, the secretary, Mark Wheeler, the membership chair, Tim Hardage, which was also unable to come. He's the webmaster. And then we have the board director at large, Carol, Mahmoud, Matthew, and David Gibson. Today we also have an election. So we have the role of the treasurer, the secretary, the webmaster, and 2 directors at large that are open for the election. So we sent an email earlier to get nominations. So we have nominees for each position, but someone, Tristan is still to be nominated until the first coffee break, and just try to find Carol or some of the other directors at large. And the idea is that you are nominated by someone and not by yourself, right? And then we could have an election in the afternoon and in normally. So there is still time to be nominated until the end of the first coffee break. A little bit of an update from the technical section. You've probably seen, if you're a member of the SPE, all the emails about the election that took place last month. So that was something that, I think that there is at least some degree of discontent with the way things are done with the SPE. So there was an election. At the end of the day, the candidate, Robin McMillan, got the position for the drilling technical director, which was following the process, but there will be some changes related to this, and we're trying to, or especially SPE is trying to hear the complaints and see what can be done better and increase the transparency of the election and how the SPE is managed. One recent change that we were not really too concerned, but now students are allowed to join technical section. So officially before we allowed students to come to this meeting, but they couldn't officially join a technical section. So that has now changed, and that opened the door to get new people into the technical section. The other thing is that OSPE Connect, probably not many people use that, but there is an idea of either revamping that or replacing that from the SPE. The other thing that we have been doing is having more meetings between all the different technical sections. There is a lot of, we are lucky to have a technical section that works very well. Usually I use it as an example of how to run a technical section, because we are, for all the papers that we have produced, our website, our bank account, and everything is seen as an example for another technical section. So it's something that they have started to have more meeting between all the chairperson of different technical sections, so everybody can learn and progress with that. And that's all I have in the chairperson update. So the next thing I wanted to do is first louder here. It is okay. Well, I want to thank him for being the chairperson during COVID. Wait a second. So we have a gift for you, Ross, if you come. So we have for a gift for you is you help us to do through COVID. So
And first of all, yeah, I realize that COVID was kind of horrendous for all of us. Sorry, I'm late. Yeah, COVID was horrendous for all of us. But somehow we managed to get through as a group. I actually think all the online meetings, it's absolutely fantastic to see you all in flesh now. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to a great meeting. Thanks very much.
not sure what happened with the image here. Sorry.
Ross,
Okay.
Ross got it closed.
All right. So I was about to go through the agenda for today at a high level, but you all have seen it, so we can well, I can go through anyway. But we're going to start with a panel conversation with the folks that join us from the regulatory agencies, and this is going to be moderated by David Gibson. And then we're going to go through the normal subcommittee updates and then the technical presentations. We'll do the election in the afternoon, and as I said, for any candidate or someone that wants to run to join the committee, we have until the end of the first coffee break. So David, you.
Okay. Well, anyways, yeah, so this panel discussion, was kind of the idea is to be able to bring in some of the regulatory people that we may not work with per se on a day-to-day basis. For some of us in the room, but there is definitely a large involvement in what we do with some of these individuals and these people. So I'd like to be able to bring up first Lisa Grant. Some of y'all know her. And we'll give them the chance to be able to introduce themselves and stuff, and give them the microphone. Tim Spear. And then Abby Adriel. So this is our regulatory group. Yeah, just hold it. That'll be the microphone.
Okay.
And so the goal of this meeting, or this, at least this panel discussion, is not for us to grill them. Right, so if y'all would just save your super technical questions for the subcommittee meetings or for stuff in the hallway. Granted, I know Lisa could probably school the vast majority of us in the room on stuff, but that's still not the goal today for us to just do, why don't you do this, why don't you do this, like, it's more for a chance for us to have a two-way
those of you who don't know me, first off, thank you so nice to be back with my feet. So that is awesome. I am currently the senior technical advisor within Bessie, so I just provide advice. It's truly amazing position to have. So I have no authority really, but I can answer some of your questions. But no, I do provide advice, and I look at all things related to the agency and the oversight. As you know, I'm getting old. 25, 27 years at some point, right? And I did most of that with an operator doing major operations from wells. And for hitting too many wells, I'm pretty sure that's how I ended up as the principal technical expert for Shell for wellbore positioning. But that was something that I had to carry with me. But I do keep surveying close to my heart. I truly do understand how wellbore positioning affects everything that we do, from both economics to safety. I try to bring that in when it's relevant within the conversation.
Tim Spear, I'm the engineering unit manager with the technical permitting section of the Railroad Commission of Texas. For those of you not familiar, we don't regulate railroads. Our guardian is responsible for the kind of more technical aspect of completion reviews, for completion reports, and we also process various other technical related applications that come in.
My name's Todd Howeger. I am with the North Dakota Industrial Commission Oil and Gas Division, and I've been with them for 26 years. I'm currently the permit manager. For the first 10 years of my career, I was in the Dickinson District inspecting oil and gas, drilling rigs and reclamation, and then moved to Bismarck to have the permit manager position. We have 3 permitting technicians who actually help prep the permits and things like that, and I have 1 engineer as well, and then I have 1 engineering technician that helps process surveys. We do appreciate you inviting us, me. I do recognize a few people's faces, so I appreciate that, and it's good to connect and continue discussions. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Abby. I'm with the Alberta Energy Regulator in Calgary. I am manager for a team that's called Subsurface Submissions and Compliance. Basically, what that means is pretty much every data that's subsurface, direct from surface, definitely be part of that, the drilling data, condition data, and all that stuff. We have a 59 that folks from Alberta will be familiar with, and what we've learned, my group over the years, was that we regulate the operators, but we discovered that it was better to go to the source. And so I've been there for 11 years now, but ever since we always preferred to work directly. So we had a group, and I said it comes from anywhere from ISCWSA directly. And a whole bunch of directors of the companies over there. So we keep them very, very close because we try to evolve over the years from very old and archaic processes to what we think is maybe more closer to what it should be now in terms of how we collect our data and essentially go to the regulation side of it as well. So yeah, we're glad to be here to learn as much from all the knowledge of the people here.
All right, so yes, I do have some questions prepared, but I would like more so for everybody here to engage and be able to ask questions as well. And don't be shy at the beginning, because from past experiences working with this group, we wait till the last 5 minutes and then everybody has a question, and then we start running late and have to say, do it out in the hallway. So if you have a question, you have a thought, stand up, just go ahead and get started with it. I'll go ahead and bring the first question. What is the biggest challenge y'all face as far as studies are concerned?
If you had asked me this question, say this time last year, I would have told you, I would have given a different answer. Our answer was that our processes were very, like I mentioned earlier, very 1940s, 50s-ish, just because we collected, I think always PDF submissions, there's a requirement that says that you drill your well. After 30 days from your finished drill date, you send us surveys, and it has to be PDF. And at source, we know that it's all digital, and we forced all the companies that work with us to send to us, go PDF, get it to PDF, then on our side of the business, we then go to a third party and we digitize it again, and then it comes back to us, whereas originally we could have just asked for it from source. But we did that for many, many years until I think it was just about a year ago. And so right now we collect our survey data. It's very much automated. It's CSV, XLS type submissions that come in. We have validation upfront that helps us. So we actually had to, we had about maybe 3 people dedicated to processing surveys, and now we've cut it down to 1 just because we automated the process quite a bit, which saves time. And it gets the output faster to help folks who on the downstream end of the business who also use that data. I'll keep it at that.
So in North Dakota, we take collecting surveys, MWD surveys, very seriously. We take pride in the fact that our first horizontal well was drilled in the Elkhorn Ranch in 1987, Elkhorn Ranch field. Since that time, we've been collecting surveys. We obviously have migrated into different systems, from keeping it into Excel format early on to Access-based, and now we're into a cloud-based system right now. So our field inspectors go out and they inspect the rig at least a couple times a week, and we collect the surveys, and then we want to make sure that the wells are actually being drilled as they were permitted, and we ensure that the company hand has the hard lines and things of that nature. But to the point, I guess, what is one of the concerns that we're seeing recently are corrected surveys. So what we're finding is that surveys are being corrected, magnetically corrected, by a few different contractors. And it appears to us that, we want to make sure that we know exactly where the well is. And if they're corrected a couple different times, it might be corrected halfway through the well and then again at TD. So I guess this is a question and maybe up for discussion point, but is there a possibility of having those surveys corrected continuously, the actual certified surveys? That would be interesting to us. And then obviously to make sure, number one, to make sure that the well is being drilled at a legal location.
I'm just going to say personally, I don't sort empty here, right? I'm very well knowing my background and being a survey, a person having to Aurora Labs, as Anders used to say. So mechanically, the surveys are sent in, they're stored in a database, anyone can come in and download them for the offshore continental shelf. But I'm going to talk a little bit more philosophically with surveys, right? So what is the struggle, or what are the challenges with surveys, I think was the question. But more philosophically, I think it's exactly the same challenge that everyone in this room faces every day. And it's understanding and being able to articulate the importance for what we're positioning accuracy and how that can impact safety and the environment. And we're starting to see that the understanding that in the core of what is being done, that it is to the core of looking at having to drill a relief well, having to be able to find it when you range at the risk of collision, but it's still not directly understood. So we'll start seeing it come in and the importance on the periphery, where you start being able to ask those deeper questions. But I think until as an industry, a surveying group, we can articulate the importance in a succinct and basic manner, I don't know that we're gonna get those leaps, or until RP78 comes out or something. We're not gonna get those leaps, to really look at that next step where they are. We're looking at accuracy, looking at error models, looking at corrections. But you have to have a case for action, and so we're more transparent about what the risks are for not knowing. Those case for actions are more difficult to make, to change our surveying practices and to change our recording practices and to change our data collection.
So, our biggest challenge is, we're still a little bit behind because, we do not collect survey data digitally. Still all comes into us in PDF format. That limits us a little bit in how we can map it. We have some tools to use, but, we're a little bit limited. We're primarily reliant on the directional survey companies and the surveyors that prepare the flats on providing us with specific information we need.
Wow.
There are shapes or there are, okay. Some people
We're
are,
worried with that word.
people are with Chevron. I really appreciate this conversation. I'll try and set it up. So we've tended to work in a paradigm where in a lease we would expect to only have one operator as well. That paradigm's been broken.
Thanks. So we have situations where we have multiple operators as well as intermingling each other. This body also believes, these are kind of referred to, that the way to manage collisions is to understand the uncertainty of the wells and to keep those uncertainty ellipses separate, to keep them overlapping. So the question I have is, given the potential for intermingling and the information to be belonging to other operators, how do we as an industry, regulator and operator and service provider, how do we work together to solve that?
That was rough.
Yeah, if I understand.
I'm gonna give it to him first.
Yeah, if I understand the question, so we look at it purely as a regulatory issue. So we do deal a lot where leases are now broken up and, not just horizontally, but vertically. You have vertical separations between operators. And for those of you, not familiar with Texas, back probably starting in the 80s, I think really, when wells were still drilled vertically and people wanted to start combining zones. We have, one of our rules is you can't combine production from separate zones. That's downhole. You can't just commingle it. Now, we'll allow exceptions to that if you show that it's reasonable and it won't cause red plates. But the result of that is to kind of speed up and streamline that process. We ended up creating a lot of fields, and so we look at fields as regulatory. They're not the geological or engineering sense of a field. They're what we define regulatory. And so we defined a number of fields that have very big vertical intervals. Sprayberry and one may be an example of that. So it would allow operators to combine all these zones without having to keep coming to us and asking permission and getting exceptions. And that was beneficial then, and then horizontal drilling came along. And we decided, well, you can drill 3 or 4 or 5 separate horizontals in one drilling location through these different layers. And then, people started vertically separating the leases, et cetera, so we have different owners. So that kind of convoluted things. But we look at it purely as protecting correlative rights, making sure that you're in the zone you're supposed to be, that you're in the zone that you own, and that you're in the spacing unit that you own. And beyond that, then really we look at it as between the operators. If they have issues, if they have problems, particularly if it's a legal problem, that's not our business. So that's kind of more between the operators.
I wouldn't just keep talking. I don't know, right? I mean, honestly, I don't know. I'm going through, listening to what people are saying, and I'm thinking about, and it's been a very eye-opening experience coming to regulator. I'll tell you, if I'd sat on the other side 6 or 7 years ago before I came, I would be giving you, oh, surely you can do this and you can do that, but understanding the legal restrictions, what you can and can't ask for, and how you operate. It's challenging, right? I think I come back to my first statement. It has to be the point where the information in theory is publicly available unless it's been typed, but most of the information would be at that point. And you would come, but how is there a regulation that says no? There isn't. There's nothing even in existence right now about collision, even with your own wells, right? I mean, theoretically you shouldn't, but there's not. But it's about to get really complicated because now we're looking at carbon sequestration and we're talking about dual use fields, right? We're talking about, now it really changes, right? And, when you have some of those wells and also even with the potential use of using some of that space for renewables and wind facilities, right? Could you even get in to drill a relief well because you have a wind turbine sitting on top of you, right? So it's about to, that question is about to get a lot more complicated. And I don't know, I think you would love to say, what is the proposal? What should be done? How do you manage it? Come to the agencies generally do not have these experts that are sitting in here. I'm just, I've been paying attention for previous things. But, and I'm here so I can talk to the subject, but looking towards in other categories too, looking towards collective recommendations, but somehow those things sort of rectified. Think beyond just 2 wells, and drilling. I didn't really say anything, but.
So I think so I'm going to take the question as basically anti-collision. So how can the regulator work with the operator and or vice versa? So the answer with North Dakota, we take it again very seriously. It happens at the permitting level and actually before that. I mean, so the commission sets up spacing units. Generally, could be talking about just a 1,280 acre spacing unit for Bakken because that's 99% of the wells in North Dakota. But generally, you'll have basically just one operator drilling in each spacing unit. So in that respect, it helps. But so in some instances, we do get situations before the commission where they might see a well that is maybe perpendicular to a well that's being drilled north-south or being proposed to be drilled north-south because of an increased density situation. So the commission staff will maybe ask at that time, how do you propose to ensure that that well is not adversely affected, or what zone is it in? They won't get it really into the weeds at that point, but just asking the questions. And then when it comes to permitting, we do have specific permitting policies, and we will review. We do want to make sure that the operator reviews all wells within 500 feet of the proposed wellbore. So that could be their own well, that could be vertical wells, it could be just about anything. So that is a permit policy, and in some cases, we may require, we may just receive an anti-collision report. And that's one of the main things that tells us, okay, they've done their due diligence. The operator has done their due diligence on the permitting side. They are aware. Main thing is, are they aware that this potential vertical well exists and they're possibly drilling within 100 feet towards the toe of the well. And as we know, there's an ellipse of uncertainty. Is there a possibility of hitting that well? Well, they are aware. What are they going to do? One of the things that we suggest, if they ask, is take a tighter survey frequency. Maybe you're taking 30-foot survey frequencies, or whatever the case might be. We also have just created a drill back policy, and I don't necessarily need to get into the weeds, but I'll just talk in a general sense. We are concerned about whether you're on spacing drilling back, or whether you're off spacing and drilling back into the spacing unit, entering the Bakken pool outside of the spacing unit. So if you are drilling back into another operator spacing unit, it's about communication. We require an affidavit indicating that the operator of the permit, the one submitting the permit, notified the offsetting owner, provided them with the directional information and completion information so that they're aware. So it's about communication, making sure that they're aware. We do have information, a wealth of information in our well files, and we maintain all of our directional surveys. They're all on the well file, on the scout ticket, top notch, as far as data storage and data collection.
Yeah, I'll just add to that a bit. So what's done in Texas is very similar to what we do when it comes to leaving the operators to sort of deal with it when it comes to trespassing issues. We've learned, or we've come up with a sort of a decision to regulate at the TD of everywhere. So where you have that bottom hole, because of the uncertainties with the ellipse of uncertainty, it's been very safe for us to just almost say what happens before you get there, and please don't quote me on that, but how you get there, we know we live in a world where there's so much uncertainty, or it's a complex science. So we just choose to regulate at the TD of the well, meaning that's where we decide how do you what we call how do you name the well itself, the unique well identifier that's created from that. What we are careful more about is what we call the referential integrity, starting from the surface location, right? We have a lot of older wells, I'm sure everybody, all the jurisdictions have the same, and with old technologies that were used 50, 60, how many years ago, to all the modern, what's available now, what we try to do is keep some kind of, just that, stick to the Alberta County System 4.1, use that as a basis, right? Then every other new stuff comes to us. Wells were doing back in the days with monuments and all that. We kind of just stick to what we know, starting from the surface location, and then you drill down, then we hook it back to where your surface locations are. It's a complex science, like you said. And just like she said as well, it's a lot of more questions than answers right now, and we're hoping that as more knowledge comes through, we'll get there. I was delighted yesterday to know of learn from what other jurisdictions do in terms of right at the permitting level. We don't necessarily ask you for when you're permitting your well, things like your articulation report and all that. At that early stages, we don't necessarily regulate that or ask for that. We deal with the land surveys and we just look at where your leases are, things like that. But it's interesting to know that other people are doing that, and of course, definitely something we can learn. But to answer your question, it is complex, and we're getting there.
All right, any more questions from the audience? Okay.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to visit. Jonathan Lightfoot with Occidental. I have a question about the P717, which is in 2017, we started working on a digital exchange format for local positioning surveys. The ISCWSA has now published that with a corresponding user guide, which has a lot of really good reference information, like what the zero depth point is, what the vertical referencing is, and then part of that was providing the industry with sort of a gift of here's how you would properly transfer data between operators, between regulators. Is there any future intent on adopting that as a requirement for the type of survey and the formatting of the information? And part of that is looking at even the details, not just the reference values and a lot of the reference information associated with like what declination was used, what given that reference model was used. And it also prescribes the ability to even capture the actual measurements, because we don't actually measure inclination and azimuth, believe it or not. We actually measure acceleration and magnetic field, and nobody can calculate it. And quite often, if we want to go and we have an offset well and knowing a better understanding, we have to contact them to see if they can pull the sensor values so we can actually further correct the survey, because the bare minimum usually isn't sufficient for safe separation between wells. So we want to actually get those raw sensor measurements and run it through a third-party correction, so we have a better idea and we can reduce the uncertainty and have more confidence in safe separation between wells and wells. So my question is kind of about that more of the reporting and reporting beyond just the bare minimum. And then part of that is also the survey frequency is another piece of that, which was sort of alluded to the fact there. We kind of have a minimum standard, with reference to, if you look at the data sets, the distance between surveys is now going away from the one stand, now we're surveying every two stands quite often. We're seeing the industry say, and I think that could lead to some well displacement issues because we don't have enough survey frequency. When you have a undulating borehole, you need to have two samples per period, and we're starting to see a lot of operators surveying every other stand, which is concerning because we do have some terms that handle that in enforcement, but still think there's should be a desire to maybe tighten that up a little bit, especially in the contested brownfield development where we're drilling wells and having, we'll put subsurface stress tests, as Pete mentioned, around the refunds or other operators coming into your lease, and you're having to now go and try to get around those to drill your oil on well. So those are some of the things I want to put out, the data exchange and the survey frequency.
Okay, so I'm going to try to answer this first because I don't know that actually a lot of people know really good on the question. So I've clearly been gone too long when I said simple language, right? And then that's one of the big problems, right? Is taking something that's quite complex and explaining what is the need, right? So what is the need to be able to take this data transfer protocol that would allow for further refinement to survey accuracy if needed, right? That's essentially what we want this data transfer for, right? So maybe you didn't need good accuracy before, now something's happened, the well's on fire, now you need that accuracy, you have that data to do it, right? But if we don't communicate that in plain language of what you could get from that, so you're never gonna get anyone to pick it up. And I'm sorry, I'm not trying to, I'm guilty of it too, you fall into this more complex aspect. So I think it's having to show the need, right? And so, again, it's sort of this epiphany coming to the government. I think, well, why would you not want to do it? Why wouldn't you just want to build a database and do it? That's storage is cheap, right? But the reality is it's not just about that. Before you can put a regulation in place, believe it or not, you actually have to do an economic assessment to ensure that it's a value, that the burden you're putting on regulating is worth what you're going to get back, right? And so you have to make that case, right? So even though data is cheap for the government, right, or for all of us, but we are paying for the government, is data cheap, but you are putting a burden on potentially some operators to now collect raw data, be able to have that sent in, and that may not be in their business model. That they may not be BP, right? They may not even know that there's raw data, right? So you still have a burden. So then I come back again and say, clearly present the opportunity, show how it would improve, so that an economic case can be made. So it's back at y'all. I just thought I'd try to answer that question for those who didn't understand some of it and answer it.
So the direct question, as far as P7 format, and I am familiar, I'll say familiar with the format, is no. That's the short answer. At this time, I would say. But the long answer is we do have a regulation that says that the operator, the directional contractor, has to submit the directional surveys within 30 days after the well attains total depth. So again, from early on when North Dakota started drilling wells, we've been collecting horizontal data. We do store that information, and we do put it out on our website. It is on the scout ticket. We do collect, again, we collect the certified surveys. We collect the non-definitive while the well is being drilled, and then we'll take a look at we'll talk to the directional contractors and WD contractors, look at the bottom line, make sure that they're being drilled, or what we put into our system, running that minimum curvature program, matches what you guys have, So there is some QC there while the well is being drilled. If it doesn't match, what's the issue? So again, we put the information into our system, and then it goes into our database. Now we're moving to more of a cloud-based system with Northstar, and it's all going to be cloud-based. But again, it'll still be put out. That information will still be put out on our scout ticket and easily attainable. We do receive the certified surveys, and they have to be submitted in a PDF format. Obviously, you're getting your measured depth, inclination, azimuth, TBD coordinates, and then you're comparing that to the information that our field inspectors received, and you're looking at that information. Obviously, there's double, triple checks to ensure that the well is legal, that the completion interval is legal at 7-inch and at TD. And I guess at this time, the way the P7 format appeared to us anyway, or else maybe I should say me more specifically, is more about raw data storage.
Yeah.
And what we want the surveys, calculated. We want those run through that minimum curvature program, and submitted by the directional contractor, the owner of the tool, because they're the ones that can attest to the fact that the surveys are true and correct to the best of their knowledge. So that's what we do in North Dakota, and we've been doing that since, again, 1987.
Can I ask a question then? So, sorry, that's probably not the right, okay, so let me ask you, because again, I understand very in detail what the P7 is and what it brings. Now, if the case was presented to you saying, okay, if you have the raw data, and in the event, let's say you had a blowout, and now you are able to refine that position because you understood from first principles where that inclination housing came from, right? So therefore now, the likelihood of you being able to range and do an intercept in a shorter period of time, would that change your view? Because that's why you have the raw data. You have the raw data not because like I can't imagine the regulator actually collecting it, but in case you needed it to further correct it. And then you could bring that accuracy in the event of an issue. Would that change the way you think about this? I'm sorry, you totally cold dropped that. Like, really? You're doing this to me?
So I asked at the beginning if you guys wanted to, like, we weren't supposed to grill you guys, but y'all were.
No, that's fine. That's fine. No, ultimately, again, the surveys they're submitted within 30 days after the well achieves total depth. So of course, they're run through, they may be corrected in some instances. If they're corrected by a third party, that's great. So that does reduce the ellipse of uncertainty, right? And the answer to your question is absolutely. I mean, we have all of the surveys. I mean, if somebody needs to intersect a well, then they can obtain those surveys from the well file very easily if they need to. Again, I mean, it's going to be up to the directional or the MWD contractor to go in and take a look at those surveys. They may have to refine them for some instance.
Right.
And of course, it depends on the age of the well. So how old is that well that they inadvertently hit? I mean, was it drilled in the 1950s? So that's a vertical well. So even your land surveying methods have changed in 60 years, obviously. So, I mean, exactly, well, you don't exactly know where that vertical well is. You can only, in some cases, infer that it's drilled basically vertical, right? And then you're going to have to refer back to the directional MWD contractors, and obviously, we would be relying on the operator to ensure that they're hiring y'all, I guess, for lack of a better word, I guess, to make sure that they're hiring, prudent contractors to intersect wells if need be. I don't know if did that
I'll
answer?
just add to that quickly. So I heard the word data exchange, and I think in Alberta, and I'm maybe with other jurisdictions as well, there's a high level of transparency, that's the right word, or the data is out there. We, as an agency, we ask for it. With the focal point, it comes in, and as soon as it comes in, it goes out again. So amongst the operators and the folks who use the data downstream, it's easily available. Now, to your question of the P7 data, it's not a wall that we are really familiar with, just because I think the answer is just because the data, the exchange issue will be more on the downstream side of the business. And if at some point, if the industry around us require it, like back to our question, yes, the value is when something goes wrong badly, then the regulator steps in. Most of the time from our end, we're more on the preemptive side. We try to prevent prevent it, but we don't necessarily have answers for when, the shit hits the fan, my language. So we try to prevent it. And so, and that's kind of how it works. So, but as far as transparency, the data is out there, and on our end, the P7 data is perhaps a little bit further along the way for us.
Yeah, it's like I said, number one, I made the president, that's what we got.
Well, I thought you forgot about me. I was hoping you forgot about me. But, I guess I'll take it in three parts. One is what we would require, or potentially require in the future. And that in itself is two parts. So one is, there again, as mentioned, it's what the industry wants, what the benefit is. I think it would require a lot of the industry coming to us and saying, we really need this. This is why we need it. This is where it will be helpful. So there's a cost benefit to the industry. Then there's also kind of Arden cost factor, manpower factor. Because if there's anything like that, then it does require programming data set up on our part. Right now, because we're trying to modernize our system more, and progressively been modernizing it. We're pretty overloaded. So, our IT people aren't out there looking to take over another big project. So the other thing is what we do or can do, and like the other agencies, we do collect the data, obviously it's analog, not digital. But we do also require notices. So if we do allow wells to be started off lease, to have off lease surface, they can have off lease penetration points. They are required to notify the offset operator. And in the case of offset penetration points, the offset operator can request the data, the survey data. So, okay, that offset penetration, they have the right to request the survey data. So kind of the way we look at it is we want to make sure the operators know what's going on and know when they have a potential problem. And at that point, that's where we kind of leave it up to the operators and say, okay, you guys are the ones with expertise. It's in your interest, to make sure you don't run into someone else's well water. And so that's where we kind of work in handle it.
So Bill, there's enough time for you to ask your question, and I think for one person to partially answer.
All right, Bill Allen with BP. Thank you everyone for coming today. I'm gonna tackle this P7 question a little more than Jonathan said. So I would say, as an industry, we put this together, and I wouldn't emphasize the extra data bit. I believe BSEE already requires P7 format as the older P7 format. So this new P7 is actually backwards compatible. You don't have to load it up with the additional data. That's one of the benefits of the scalable. So as an industry, we've not really adopted it. This timing is perfect. Last week I was asked by the IOGP to see why we're not adopting this format and what we would need to do to standardize. And I think a lot of operators and suppliers in this room all agree, what a great idea. We have one way to format and report data, and I don't know if anybody's willing to use it. So there is a challenge there. I guess to make this easier, yes, no answers, or depends is allowed. If you were just to give a yes, no, it depends answer, if the industry standardized on this to some degree, and this, of course, you look at all the raw data, we actually use the old format, which could be printed, it could be a PDF still. If we were to adopt that P7 format, would you accept a reporting format or a PDF, or would you find a way to accept that data, or is it a bureaucratic process that might take infinity of so much?
I would say for us, probably, I'd have to go back and look at our regulations, but, I don't think we're real specific on format. So, it is potential you could present it to us in any format, that's readable and attainable.
Apparently we already do,
Yeah.
but, according to Bill, you might know. Okay, good. But I think the other thing is, would the regulators store the other data that came with it, right? I think that's really the gem in that, right? So if you need it, you have the raw data, you have to do it, calculate. That's more complicated question. Again, storage is cheap, but you make the case for it. Right now, would they make a reg requiring it? Highly unlikely. But would they actually put it into the database? I'm not sure. It depends on how it's presented.
It depends. I mean, obviously, you're talking to one person here. And I mean, we are an organization, we work as a team from the top down, obviously, just like everybody. Again, I mean, we want to know that the well is drilled. When the well attains total depth, I mean, is the well legal or is the well not legal? You know, and the storage of the P7 is an interesting topic. I'm not well versed on it. I'll just be 100% honest with you. We would have to, we're always open to new and interesting, ideas and formats and whatever else. So I wouldn't say it's out of the question, but we would need to see a benefit of it, I guess. I'll put it that way.
It's the benefit of it.
Yeah, very similar to that. It's for us, so somewhere between yes and it depends. What guides our the decision-making process for data that regulatory decisions is, do we need this data to achieve a regulatory objective, or does it help us regulate better? And I think we can make the case for that. And so that's why I think it's a yes. Now, the format, it's a formatting issue. I almost think that maybe this time last year, when we brought in a whole bunch of industry folks and we had a feedback session, maybe because like I said, I only got some of the P7 data not too long ago. If it had been an issue, it might be something we may have incorporated into a new directive. It takes a while to get a directive or a regulatory change out there. So even if I say yes, it might be 5 years, yes, but it's still 5 years, or maybe even longer. But I think, keep it short, yes, I think we can. If we can make the case, which I think is an easy case to make.
All right, so I have one last question. We want to be short. Did y'all enjoy this with this beneficial
For me, absolutely, I learned.
And then for the audience, for you guys, do y'all see
I spoke for you.
Going back to some of the there we go. So, that was our second.
So next presenter is Andy McGregor, an update from the Aero Model Maintenance Committee.
Good morning.
virtual, so.
Yeah, so you sort of
Everybody's-
feel like you
yeah,
see
yeah,
people.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's why when you actually. Oh.
Yeah.
So then the facilitation is they're implanting all.
Audio test 1 2 3. Audio test 1 2 3. For anybody that's out there watching live, let me know if I've got the audio working again. Audio test 1 2 3. Audio test 1 2 3.
We have this one, and it's connected to this, so I think it may pass the.
Will actually move slides, yeah. That'll be good. So you've got a microphone in one hand, or you're using this thing?
So, let's see.
Yep, works. Right. That's both hands, microphone pointer.
Yeah, no coffee.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks, Ed. All right, I get to be the buzzkill. Everybody sit down now. Just kidding, just kidding.
You were enjoying this far too much.
All right, we are collision avoidance subcommittee update.
Is this?
Good morning, everyone. This is my first update of the collision avoidance subcommittee. I'm new in the chair role. So for those of you that don't know me, I've been coming to these meetings since about 2000. I think the very first one was actually hosted by Andy Brooks. I've been a member on the air model and collision avoidance subcommittees since they started in 2004, 2006. And for my working role, I do all the anti-collision, air modeling, and survey processing at Schlumberger. Been there 31 years. Just wanted to thank the previous chairs, Harry Wilson, Steve Sabrin, and Gary Skinner for leading me in a pretty good place to start off. So, all right, we had our first meeting that I chaired yesterday. One of the first things was to get up to speed and through all the pandemic and virtual meetings and stuff, you know, some things fall through the cracks and notes and that. So we spent our first part kind of catching up where we had left action items and determining the status of it. And then we had a couple of presentations by Pete Clark and Jerry Codling. And I had no idea how fast we would go through things or slow. So we ended up timed to where we were really back to our roots as a subcommittee, as a working group, and we actually got to work on things and get some things accomplished. So in the update of the action items, we went through a list and we determined which ones were keepers. We were going to keep those on the status, and you'll see the next slide, the ones we parked. So we had a previous one to update the bibliography that Bill had previously been undergoing, and it's just kind of stalled, and he knew why, and so that'll carry on. Each of the organizations there, Air Model Maintenance Group and Collision, we've had our own lexicons, and even the QC group, and even probably the Well Intercepts group have made our own lexicons. Well, of course, we have things that are supposed to be the same that are not, and so we want to do a harmonization across all these subcommittees to all of us get on the same working sheet. And we'll be making more updates to the collision avoidance subcommittee portion of the website. Andy McGregor has just done that for air model maintenance to make it, we have a lot of information in there. It's just not easy to find and to navigate. So we hope to improve that. There was a previous action item on inferred well position that Pete had brought up, and we had decided to create a subcommittee on that, and we're keeping that. That's going forward. And then previously a thing that we had made the sidetrack working group, which was really a bridge between the two subcommittees. So it's like, okay, who approves it? We approved it under the air model maintenance before, but that was a hanging thing in the anti-collision subgroup. These have been parked. We had on there at one time to show a real collision and how you would do a root cause analysis and then look at the human factors. And that was decided previously that we're going to park that. There was also, we were looking at how people, whether they've taken up the SPE anti-collision rule that we created, and it's been slow going. And we thought, well, do we have to convince people? And so there had been an item to create like a presentation pack that people could use to advocate for it. And we had that on here. Nobody really knew where that was. And in the end, we got some feedback that probably wasn't even going to be as useful as we thought to begin with. A lot of the previous meetings had been to look at our anti-collision rule, and there was a lot of look at as people started to implement it and see problems with two little things on there: our project ahead component and our surface margin. And we've done a lot of analysis, and there's a lot of that in the minutes and work that people have done. And I think at first we were looking, okay, do we need to change these? Do we need to change the rules? And the consensus we came to was, no, we don't need to change it. What we need to do is create a guidance note for it. So those are not, so I would say those are parked. We're not going to modify them, but we're just going to give more guidance on how to use them the way they're intended. Out of that became this new action item, creating that addendum with guidance notes on that. And then the other part was we got rid of the slide pack, but what we do have is information on organizations that have implemented the new rule and kind of lessons learned, and we'll either put together a notes to keep track of, or maybe it'll become an SPE paper. So Pete made a presentation. He had gone through and done some comparisons looking at our benchmark of results for the anti-collision and two independent software systems. And he just presented what the differences were, if any. And the summary was that here's how he compared them, compared them along the path. We have 11 test trajectories that are supposed to test different aspects of anti-collision. I think mainly the center to center almost always fits very, very, very close. And everything else matched well in his conclusions. with the exception of our sidetrack well. And that all stems back to, we just had that sidetrack working group. And so any of those changes in that methodology mainly hasn't been implemented in the two different software systems. There was some question about, how close is close when we do these comparisons. And then Andy pointed out that we have documented how close we think is adequate, and that it's actually a lot tighter than 5%. He did another comparison of, okay, this was the overall points, and that really highlighted that we've gone to Rev 5, and probably the diagnostics files we have are maybe for Rev 4, and so all of those need to be updated is the big takeaway from here. He gave another presentation on comparison of the separation rule, separation factor between the main rule and dispensation, and showed a few slides of just the comparison of when the objective was to look at where they would kick in. And as you can see here, after a while, this is for each plot has its own line, so it should go asymptotically down to whatever value that's at. You can see that there's a big disparity in close-up combined uncertainty, but it goes away pretty rapidly. Here he's showing just the difference, and you see the same thing. Everything starts to line up on each other. And his summary is that after about 15 feet, the difference is minimal. Jerry Codling then graciously gave a report on his work on implementing this sidetrack modification. And really, it looks like things have gone well. He had a little bit of feedback from users that they're getting things that they're not quite expecting, and maybe anytime we portray things as worse, they're not going to like it. But our objective has always been to get closer to the truth as we can. So, as we said, things are still not finished. We have the other software vendors to completely implement it. We just approved the final memo. And I think the thing that was outlined for Jerry was that we haven't completely addressed how gyros interact with this, especially if you have an initialization above the tie-in point, where we're supposed to zero things down at the tie-in point. So we'll rely on Jerry's wisdom to give us some guidance on that. So then that was the end of we had gotten to the end of our agenda. And so we decided to take the time to actually work on some of those action items. And one of the big ones was Pete had been spearheading working on normalization, standardization of anti-collision reports, because any operators in the room know you get different vendors and they're going to give their version of an anti-collision report. And we use close terminology, but not exactly the same. And it can get confusing, especially when you have new engineers coming in that aren't familiar with each vendor's reports. So our objective was to go through those, seeing what the minimum standard would be that you would want on a report and what exactly those would be called. So we spent some time on this exact part, getting the text exactly what we would say. And these are recommendations. The overall theme of it was that if someone's report didn't want to put that in the header, everything would be footnoted to say, okay, this equals this, as a backup. Okay. Here are the 13 columns we agreed on. But I can say there may be a small error in whether we included these last ones criteria. But I don't think they're a surprise to anybody. This would be kind of the minimums you would want on a report. Obviously, there are a lot of other parameters and factors you can add in, but this is this is just the first step. This task isn't done. We're going to move on to saying mandatory header type things. What kind of information you want. You're going to want to know the error models and so forth. So the other objective was to start that new memo as to how to use the anti-collision, and that was really kind of an individual thing Jerry did, kind of going around the room and doing a little bit of an interview on how people use certain portions for him to write that. But that was work that did get done. We had 25 attendees. This was on the sign-in sheet. I had put asking what's the uptake of the anti-collision rule. So 25 people, we had 8 yeses, and these are the organizations they belong to that are either using or have implemented the anti-collision rule. The one part we haven't done is it hasn't been uptake a lot is the Rev 5, using the relative positions and using the correlations of the magnetic terms. That's still a work in progress, and for those that have looked at it, it's a big black box because we're even diving in deeper into the mist that users probably don't understand. And the other part of it is, like I said, we need to update all these diagnostics. These are just a review of what keepers, this is what we're going to do. We have people assigned, who's going to do what. The ongoing actions are obviously to clean up our documentation. And if you looked at what we had for actions, most of it is documentation and just having it detailed how people can adopt these things we come up with. That's all I have.
Thank you, Darren. That was your collision avoidance. All right, next up, we've got Jerry Hubley and his technical presentation. Oh, there we go.
The other mic on. Okay, use them. Okay. Hello, Jerry Codling, Halliburton Landmark. Some of you know me through support as the guy behind Compass. So I've been looking into some aspects of the error model. There's some pace plans going on. It says not more than Rev 5. We had a hard enough time implementing Rev 5, and then it looks into more data. But it's kind of when you get too many support questions, you're trying to fix things up, and oh well, easy life, go and look at some data. So it's a pastime or a distraction for me in my sad life. So looking to start with directional survey comparison methods. I won't dwell too much on that, but it's one of the goals of getting better data so that we can use good comparisons and be more confident in our comparison methods so that we know that redundant surveys are actually working for us, to give us confidence in the primary surveys. So just what I'm going to cover here, a short start with the standard survey comparison method, which we call the RIP test, or relative instrument performance. It's this method that we have implemented and a number of others have implemented to do with just looking at inclination and azimuths at standard depths and comparing them between two surveys and comparing them against the error model. And seeing how they perform relative to the other error model, whether they're within 1 sigma or 2 sigma of the expectation of the error. We found that particularly on inclination comparisons that the method doesn't work particularly well. We changed some things in Rev 5, so we actually made the random errors which do affect these comparisons possibly too large over too large a range. So I had a favorite data set that I use, which has got a lot of horizontal pump down gyros that I can use for comparisons. And there's also another aspect in here that I wanted to look at, that I have some projects with customers, including a mining company, to look at short-term accuracy in geosteering and the effect of inclination effects, sag, and random misalignment. but mostly for high angle or horizontal wells. So I had this data set, 3 main hole sizes, fairly shallow but very long horizontal wells, and they use pump down gyros for quite a lot of the horizontal pump down and drill pipe. So it was a good comparison data set against the MWD over the same interval. And there were like 150 of these, so quite a lot. This is a tabular format of the RIP test. I won't go into too much detail on it. It's just over certain intervals, you have inclination and azimuth from 2 survey instruments. You look at the delta difference, and then you also calculate from the error model the combined error that you expect in both inclination and azimuth. You compare the difference over each station with the expected error. There you have a ratio on inclination and a ratio on azimuth, and then you do a mean and standard deviation, and you get a number which you can quantitatively assess whether it's confident you're in these 2 surveys are measuring the same section, or there's not some gross error. So this is just a typical data set that you can do the same exercise in Excel, but we just do it in the software where you can deal with a lot more stations. So there's a positive difference and there's a negative difference, and then there's the actual. So this is azimuth difference versus measured depth on a number of stations, so you can see the interval change. It's not widely used, but used by a couple of companies, but we'd like to promote its usage. But I suspect the number of redundant surveys, if you have them available, then you can use a tool like this. So this would be a typical run through a set of data. And of this data set, and you can see what we have is, here is azimuth difference, here is inclination difference. Then this is really just station number and looking at the differences, and you can see a lot of random scatter. The mean on azimuth is really just due to systematic azimuth errors, which would probably likely be reference system errors, like your declination model. On the inclination, so that's got a 0.2 or minus 0.2 mean, and a standard deviation of 0.25 on the data. So there's quite a lot of scatter on azimuth, and there's a fair amount of scatter on inclination. Using the old error model for high angle, we see a lot more points typically going outside of the inclination error envelope. And that, the contributor to that will be the randomness of inclination measurement due to misalignment. Oops. So I look primarily at inclination, but the random behavior should be evident on the azimuth data. But unfortunately, on too many of this sample set, I saw drifts for other reasons, some of which I have a hard time explaining. So mainly I just discarded the azimuth data set as having too many external semi-systematic differences. For example, azimuth, this is just station count on the x-axis, and then the differences. So this is one survey, this is another survey, this is another. So sometimes you see a systematic drift, sometimes you see a wavy pattern, and then there may have been a tool change there or something like that. And then on this, to me, having experienced this before in the North Sea, this looks to me like a magnetic storm. But this data is actually from the Middle East, so and this is going plus or minus 4 degrees. So it seems a bit wild for the Middle East. Or I'm told it's way out of proportion to what you would expect at that latitude. So I'll have to go back and look at that data and see what's going on. It does seem the periodicity does seem about 1 day long, so between peaks. which is that approximate rate of penetration, probably about 800 foot an hour or 80 foot an hour and so on. So very strange. Anyway, I discarded all that. So back to the inclination data. I separated out these runs into, for the upper hole sections, it was just 1,000 foot intervals. So that would, roughly 10 stations. And for the horizontal, which were really long, I did them in 2,000 foot chunks. And just looked at their behavior relative to other things going on, mainly depth, inclination, and dogleg severity. So the average dogleg severity over that 1,000 foot interval, and tried to correlate the data. But luckily, they had also recorded in-run, out-run on the gyro. So this is really, on this axis is just sample number. And this is average in-run, out-run difference over that interval. And it's telling me that the standard deviation on that's about 0.1, 0.12, which is in line with the numbers that we're used to seeing for gyro comparisons. If the individual random error misalignments just to centralization and so on, it would be about 0.07 or 0.08 for this type. And also they're running these gyros in internally upset drill pipes, so I imagine there's a little bit of vibration when you're running these things. So I don't know if that has an effect or not. But, getting to the three, looking at the three hole sizes. So this is 16 inch, this is 12 and a quarter, and this is 8.5. And the axis is really, this is difference again, and it's going up to 0.8 degrees. And this axis is dogleg severity between 1 and 5 on each graph. And the range of values, when you have the larger hole sizes, you've got more casings between the original MWD and the gyro. So with the larger hole sizes, you tend to see more scatter and less systematic behavior because it's all centralization, and each casing you run straightens out the hole. But when you're looking at the 8.5, these long horizontals, the gyro is actually, it's reading out 3 meters, 10 foot, and it's seeing a lot closer to the real hole shape. And the main difference here is that the MWD is actually in a stiffer drill collar, and you are actually seeing a dogleg severity correlation, a lot more of it than you do see in the upper hole sizes. So I looked in more detail at the 8.5 hole just to look at these comparisons, with an idea of getting a better idea of this misalignment or random behavior with dogleg severity and other characteristics. I didn't see much to do with depth, although you'd expect to see a bit of depth shift between a gyro and an MWD. Gyros still run on a wireline, and an MWD using drill pipe depth, but I saw no correlation with depth. And well, there wasn't any range on inclination because they were all nearly horizontal. But I did see a fairly strong correlation with dogleg severity. And that's what I'm seeing is that the MWD is in 6.5 collar, drill pipes either 5.5 or 5 7/8. The drill collar's twice as stiff as the drill pipe, and also you're surveying less frequently. So I believe what I'm seeing this correlation behavior is that there's a static, roughly static misalignment of 0.1 degrees. But what's happening here is this extended course length feature that we've already put in the error model, and the degree of proportionality and the gradients seem to indicate fairly closely with the 1 sigma value that we use in the error model currently. So I feel that's a justification of the extended course length feature. So yeah. Looking at the others, It's looking at the effect of different hole sizes. Primarily the second graph here, I mean, this again is looking at the 16-inch and 12.25-inch runs. There is some correlation, but it's not as strong to do with dogleg severity. So I presume that's the extended course length feature, but because you're running inside either one or more extra casings, there's a more of a straightening effect, so that's being more disguised. Whereas the MWD, for example, would be a 9.5 drill collar and 16-inch hole, pretty stiff. But I looked at the three different hole sizes. I backed out the effect of dogleg severity. And I actually saw, and I don't quite understand this, I don't have an answer to it, but I saw more variation in 12.25-inch hole than I did in 16-inch hole, even though the 16-inch has more casings in. So I think looking about the stiffness of the VHA and things like that. So I don't have an answer to that. All it's telling me is that when you're doing survey comparisons, the more casings between one survey and another, between the gyro and the FWD, it becomes less useful as a comparison tool. Mostly the 16-inch hole agreed roughly with the 8.5-inch hole set of results. So I presented previously on low angle misalignment because I wanted to see how, if this low angle misalignment that we came up with, which was 0.3 degrees random, and I'm not going to explain these graphs, this went on before, but this was really the justification for the value we use for low angle misalignment, but it may just be mostly for very low angle wells. But the way we've implemented it in the error model is it's a fairly broad brush, and you still get most of the effect up to 45, 50 degrees. And that's not really what it's about, because most of the study we did was at, very near vertical wells. So this main graph here I've shown before is just looking at the old Rev 4 misalignment versus the new model misalignment. And it has a significant effect very near surface in that the new model actually estimates greater misalignment and requires more well separation and anti-collision over roughly the first 1,000, 1,200 feet. And then below that, if you're still drilling mostly vertical or lightly inclined, like these node wells for your unconventional projects, Rev 5 allows you to drill much deeper and keep closer well separations compared to the Rev 4, which is really just a linear code. But how does that behave relative to this new high angle misalignment that I was just using this study to have a look at? This is the annoying one if you're on an error model subcommittee, because I'm actually looking for some degree of change, because this is the weighting between high angle and low angle misalignment. So the effect of high angle misalignment still is fairly dominant up to about 40 or 60 degrees. The graphs that's the degree error, and that's the inclination angle on both graphs. So this is my proposed model, which uses low angle misalignment, but it uses the reverse weighting function that we put in for the SAG model. Because I believe this random high degree misalignment you get in near vertical wells is caused by the upper VHA flopping around. The moment you get any significant or anything like above 10 degrees inclination, everything's tight on the low side. You don't get that. It becomes a SAG error. And similar to SAG error, we changed the weighting on SAG to kick in a lot more, and we have evidence on previous meetings of that. So this is my view on that, is that we have a continuous random misalignment, which is almost the one that we had in Rev 0 of the error model. So we're going back 20, 25 years. And we have this additional low angle misalignment, which only really kicks in, up to 20 degrees. But this one agrees a lot more with the brick test results. It gives more significant or more useful results if you use this than the one above where we're overestimating inclination errors. And also this is a lot more useful a value that I'm using for these short-term geosteering geological comparisons. So I explain just the purpose of that. You have the last good marker, then you're drilling and projecting, and then you need an estimate. So this is the interface with the geological systems where you're trying to figure out how close you are within this layer or that layer, and the degree of error, and combining that with geological uncertainty over that interval. So these kind of numbers are a lot more useful than the ones that we had previously. So that's pretty much it. Just to conclude, just the way I want to use these misalignment numbers is it probably doesn't have any significant effect on anti-collision. It's got a minor effect if you're using driller's targets type calculations. It's got a lot more use when you're doing survey comparisons, as I'm doing with the RIP test. We feel the numbers are more realistic. And for these, getting the error in geological error, whether it's long interval or medium or short for project ahead, I think the value is more useful based on this historical data analysis. With respect to the RIP test, I need to do a bit more work looking at the effect of hole geometry. You saw those inconsistent results between 16 and 12 and a quarter. So I need to look a little bit more about that and how useful they're in the RIP test and what needs to be included and what needs not to be included. So it's just another facet of the error model that we'll use in survey comparisons. And if effectively in RIP test, you can ignore that low angle misalignment unless you do have doing that type of work at low angle. But we found the RIP test is quite difficult to get to work at low angles anyway, just because of the degree of variability in the data. So that's it for me. Thanks for the opportunity to present, and if you have any questions.
Thank you for the presentation. I don't have a question. I have just a comment. I did some stuff on this, theoretical one simulation, and the difference is pretty explainable, and it depends on micro dogleg of well. And I don't have a big picture, but it can be up to, I see, up to 0.5 degrees. And here is I found that simulation is on this red line, and it cannot be random. It cannot, you see the zero, or a systematic component. So I don't know, but yeah, it can be compensated for, but pretty complicated because you need to restore it like to the profile and continuous information. It's not just enough that some tricky stuff. But it is. But it's pretty explainable, and I don't know. I got a like similar result, but it's theoretical approach, and it depends on DHA design and micro profile.
Yeah, thanks, Constantine. The issue with continuous measurement of inclination and azimuth is that unfortunately the instruments still stuck in those sticks, 6.5 mil on it. So you're not really measuring microtortuosity of those features. I mean, the only way to do that is get a caliper log, really. But this microtortuosity is really, well, microtortuosity is really what we built the XCL error term around, to deal with between survey stations the fact that the wellbore is not a continuous curve. So yeah.
Mike Atchell with Pacesetter Directional Calgary. Thanks for the presentation. Second time seeing it, so it's nice to get a bit of a refresher. So you showed quite a few plots of data points with lines drawn through them, and I was taking a look at just the R-squared values on those, and I didn't know if I had any comment on the correlation levels on the plots you showed, and you kind of heard to a strong correlation on the one relationship that had a 0.35 R-squared value, if you had any comments on that.
I really didn't look to, I mean, I did put the R-squared values on the graphs, but I didn't really look into it. I mean, I just visually compared the data. And you got a strong correlation, but yeah, I could do some more. And also, I think your observation from yesterday that maybe I need to go back and look at the data. I looked at the data here on 100-foot intervals, just interpolated in my software. And maybe I should go back and look at the actual reported NWD survey intervals and look at the difference there. And that could potentially remove some of the scatter and the correlation there. But yeah, mostly it was visual. I mean, you call it data science, or I call it data science, but it was just eyeballing the data.
Thanks. Yeah, and I did have a follow-up question as well. So this is one data set, one gyro run compared to the NWD run. Have you contacted any of the other gyro providers for their examples of data sets? Because I imagine they have quite a few more examples of a gyro run and NWD run the same test on.
I have talked to the gyro companies and tried to get data sets, and they have provided me with some, but there's no data quite as good as this one because of these pump down gyros in horizontal. Almost all the other gyro runs have some intermediate casing or drill pipe or tubing that's straightening out the hole. You know, they just don't read as good as this. I mean, this set of data is like ends to, and I'm not really supposed to have it. It was not supposed to be allowed out of the country. But,
Yeah, Adrian De Ross with gyro data. Yeah, we do run the rig test, and we also do chi-square tests and compare surveys, and we have it more and more now, but something that we have found is that your analysis of the dog leg severity increasing the random noise. I don't know if actually the opposite. When we run these tests, and if there is a high dog leg, we usually see that the data doesn't match. And we have attributed that quite a bit to the interpolation process. Because if you have a large bill and then you're 2 feet off, then it might explain the 0.08 or the 0.05 difference there. So sometimes we see that we pass the chi-square test, everything matches, but the area with the high dog leg, it fails or it shows that poor agreement. And maybe if you were to shift the depth a couple of feet up or down, that significantly changed the value when you pass the test. So it's just a caveat whether it's one way or the other, right? But the interpolation causes the error when you have the document.
yeah, I mean, that's quite possible, and also in my answer to Mike, that perhaps I should relook at this data using the actual reported NWD survey intervals. But the definite correlation with dogleg is really what we built the XCL error terms. But I have to check my code whether the XCL actually contributes to an extra tolerance in the inclination and azimuth that's used in the RIP test, because I haven't revisited that, to be honest. So it's worth looking at. Thanks, Eddie.
A quick question, an easier question, I think.
I just want to check my understanding. So it looked like, I was trying to put two thoughts together between the existing and the proposed misalignment. It looked like the starting, the low inclination misalignment essentially starts with the same balance exactly. And at high inclination, you end at the same point one, and it's just the shape of the curves in the middle, right? Correct?
Yeah, the model for misalignment that was modified for the Jarrow paper, 1990-408 or something like that. They had a component that graduated from a high angle misalignment to, a low angle misalignment to a high angle misalignment, and when one went down, the other went up. So one was like cosine of the behavior, and the other one was the sine of the behavior. So they were supposed to act in tandem. But we always only originally, it's up to Red 4, we just said one number anyway. So there wasn't any change in misalignment. Then with Red 5, we came up with the low angle misalignment. But I'm saying really plain here that low angle misalignment really works differently to the mainstream misalignment, which is, if you go back to the original work of the error model paper, they did roll tests, and they came up with a number of 0.06 or 0.7. And this residual 1 degree is mostly roll test and possibly some of the behavior, all tool joints in the BHA are not quite straight. They're very close to straight, but it's maybe slightly more than we originally estimated, but it's still a random thing because every MWD survey is on a different tool face, where it should be. So, yeah, we changed the, I feel there's the roll test misalignment, and then there's this low angle behavior, which is effectively the inverse of sag at very low angles.
Do we have time? All right.
Make it quick.
First, I'd like to know who came up with the word micro dogleg. Because I think a micro, I think small, so it's a super small dogleg. We should call it micro survey station and mega dogleg. So anyway, just a little bit of comedy. But one of the questions I have about your stuff there, seems apparent to me that maybe at some point in the future, would you envision us being able to use the whole size to adjust the terms being used based on that? Since it's in the database already, we're using it for collision avoidance calculations for head separation. It seems like it responds differently for different hole sizes. So would there be some, opportunity to utilize the hole size information to improve, how these tools respond in different intervals of, 36-inch hole versus 26, 17.5 centimeter? That's the question.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good observation, Jonathan. It's, yeah, I would actually like to implement hole size because this 0.3 assumption for low angle misalignment is based on the floppiness of the part of the VHA that's above the mass stabilizer and it flops around at low angles. And that degree of floppiness will be dependent on hole size versus color size. So if you're drilling smaller diameter holes, that effect should be less. So 0.3 might be too much for certain types of wells. So yeah, we could have terms that are dependent on basically hole to collar theories. It's a valid point. I mean, that's why I wanted to look, because this is a very regular data set in 3 hole sizes, 3 collar sizes, and 1 drill hole. So yeah. Yeah, work in progress. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Next up is Tim with the webmaster update.
Yeah, perfect. So I'm Tim Payton from Superior QC. Phil is not able to be with us today. He had texted me and reached out and asked me to present on behalf of him for the webmaster. I looked at the schedule and saw it was between Jerry and Benny presenting, so I knew I would need a break from taking minutes so my hands could catch up. So graciously accepted. So yeah, Phil, this handsome gentleman here, has been the webmaster for a while with ISCWSA. These are his qualifications and where he's worked. And yeah, we miss Phil being here, but hopefully we'll see him at the next meeting. So website hits are up. The event page hits were much higher than October 21 and March 22. Hopefully that's just a product of it being an in-person meeting. More folks are wanting to be here and are visiting those pages and seeing what we have going on as far as events and upcoming things with ISCWSA. The top 5 pages hit rate, again, higher than October 21 and March 22. The contact us is slightly down on the previous 18 months. He has that as a low light. I would argue that it's kind of a highlight. I've gotten a lot less nude photos, auto insurance, emails. So I would argue that's a good thing. So yeah. Subscribers to the ISCWSA.net page. So this is very important. Subcommittee chairpersons are now editing as super users. So if you are a subcommittee chair and you do not have the super user privileges, please reach out to Phil to get that updated. You'll be able to go in there, update your content, add or remove positions and officers, add files, as well as add a distribution email. We can also host the OWSG meetings on the webpage. Most of the subcommittee meetings are mostly signed up. The subcommittee members are mostly signed up. So go in there when you register and log in for your account as a member as opposed to just a user. You do have the ability to add your different subcommittees that you'll be participating in, and then eventually get the updates from those subcommittee chairs. There is a link for submitting the tendency support tickets. So if you have any issues with that, subcommittee chairs, go ahead and submit your ticket through there, or you can reach out to Phil. For the SPE website, so in order to join the technical sessions, you must be a member of the SPE. That talks about joining the wellbore positioning technical section itself. And to vote in our meetings, that's also one of the requirements, is being an SPE member in good standing. So ensure that, I know it's getting ready to turn the calendar year and everybody's been getting the updates from SPE to send them more money and continue on your membership. So I'm sure Mark will talk a little bit more about that as he comes for his update. The link to join the SPE.org and WBTS technical section, this will be up on the website after the meeting, so you can go right here, click on this. What you need to do is the SPE page links directly to ISCWSA.net. What you can do to go in there, you'll click on subcommittee topics and then technical sections. Underneath technical sections, you'll see that wellbore positioning is down there. Make sure you click on that and add that to your SPE profile. When I go in as the secretary and send out the email updates, you have an option in there to click receive or not receive those emails. We're sending information about the meetings, different subcommittee updates, things like that coming through in forms. Check your junk mail as well, and add that email from SPE as a trusted deliverer. I think on the last update that I sent for logins for the registration rather, it went to about 2,500 folks that are registered for wellbore positioning technical section. Obviously we have almost 100 people here today, but there's a lot of folks out there that are signed up for WPTS that don't necessarily participate in ISCWSA. So if we could increase those numbers, maybe increase a little bit of more participation, that'd be good for the industry as a whole. Just the other ISCWSA social media. The Twitter is gone, so no more ISCWSA Twitter, so no more tweets coming from Phil. The LinkedIn page, however, is very active. Just over 2,000 members as of yesterday when I looked. It's a small 6-month increase in membership. But overall, if you have information that you want to go to that page and share with the group, you are able to go in and add information to that page. We verified that yesterday. That you as a member of the LinkedIn page can go and put things on there and share, and the moderators, if it's not relevant, it may be taken down, but for the most part, be able to start conversations and things like that with fellow folks in the ISCWSA. Some of the website enhancements, subcommittee chairs and member call for website functionality ideas. If you have something that you'd like to see added to the website, please bring that forth. Let Phil know. And we'll get that over to Tendency and see what we need to do to make that happen. some of the things that are in progress right now, the subcommittee email accounts. So that'll be different subset of groups. So instead of sending a blast to everybody in the wellbore positioning technical section, we'll be able to target specific subcommittee groups. Voting functionality, we're looking at adding that as a feature going forward. Currently, it's more of an in-person, a little bit more arduous process for voting as far as nominations and things like that. We set up Google Forms this year and submitted it like that. So we're looking to streamline that. Hopefully we'll have that done by fall of next year for the next round of elections. And then the controlled document storage, that's in progress. So that'll be your subcommittee projects, ebooks, group documents, things like that. Be able to put into a controlled environment so that they're not just floating around getting snatched up and posted all over the dark web. So special thanks to the committee subcommittee chairs and the members feedback and support on the website. And Phil, thank myself for presenting today. So blaze through that. Give you guys a little bit of time back. Any questions for the website?
I have a comment.
Yes, ma'am.
And since I have the mic, able to go first. Just in terms of LinkedIn, please do post content. It does need to be non-commercial. Otherwise, somebody, I won't name who, may remove it. But I do encourage everyone to post on it besides me and Phil.
All right, thank you.
All right, up next, we've got Benny, his technical presentation. Get pulled up here. What's
Number one. This one, the first number, yeah.
Because you're number one.
No, just make it easy. Just shut it up.
Take it away, sir.
Okay. I think the screen is a little bit blurred, huh? Anyway, no problem. Thank you. This presentation is about the knowledge sharing that I did for the distinguished lecture. So before that, I'm going to show the process a little bit for the distinguished lecture. So I'm not really sure. I mean, you guys attend my distinguished lecture in April in New Orleans or not? Any of you attending? Man, you guys missed that fun. Okay, that's the first time we met in person. Okay, regarding myself, I worked for Schlumberger for 38 years, and I just retired 2 years ago. And my expertise is grow with the Schlumberger. Okay, when I joined Schlumberger, Schlumberger was small. So when the Schlumberger grow, my expertise also growing. Yeah. So I graduated from ITB in Indonesia with a degree in digital electronics, and many people are wondering what the hell I'm doing in the oil and gas. Okay. That's my bio. I've been working in many different countries, visiting more than 75 countries, and obviously working resides in more than 30 countries. Okay. So let me just pitch a little bit about the distinguished lecture. To go through the process, I mean, you need to be nominated. The nomination is very simple. Okay. Just need to get companies and individuals, but not by your own company. Okay. So you go through that process, and then you submit the abstract. And then they will, and a bio, okay? And then they will select, if they say interested on the abstract, they will let you do the presentation. And the process is quite intensive, okay? I did at least 4 or 5 sessions. And the good thing is to provide the feedback. And the audience is not necessarily all technical people, okay? So I'm dealing also the non-technical people. So that's, I think, is very good in terms of our mission to dissipate the knowledge, okay, knowledge sharing. That's very good in that process, right? I really enjoy doing this, okay? And the place, I done more than 20 sessions. 20 SP local chapter and 4 student chapter. And I'm planning to do more because many universities or some of the clients contact me directly to do the presentation, okay? I think this is very good in terms of the visibility for the ISCWSA to the industry, okay? So let me start That's the title, Good Practice in Well Control Intervention via Relief Well Subsurface Interception, right? So we move away using the term best practices, because the best practices will have the tendencies of, unintentional negative meaning, especially the younger generation, and regulatory reference and regulation. So best could be in a certain condition, but not all. So we just use that, the good practices, right? And the presentation I'm doing here is more like knowledge sharing, right? So that's the key. So let's get back in time on the relief well history. The first relief well, recorded relief well, is done in to control the Medley 1 in Conroe, Texas. It's around 30 miles from here. That was done in 1933. And the lesson learned of that project or the interception process is published in the Popular Mechanics, okay, 1967 document. I don't know whether you guys seen those documents. I use a lot, okay, Popular Mechanics and Popular Electronics as my reference. So let's look at the most recent one. I call it the most recent one that's happening offshore. The first of all is Macondos. I'm sure you guys are very familiar with that. And then that's dealing with 20 to 50,000 barrels per day, depending on which report you read, okay? And that created one of the largest disaster, right, in the history of oil and gas. I'm taking the lesson learned from you, Bill, okay? Taking the lesson learned, yeah? Okay, the next one is happening in Timor Sea, in Australia. This Montara is dealing with around 2,000 to 3,000 barrels a day, okay? They create a spill as well, okay? And the most recent one that I know, okay, is in the offshore Northwest Java Sea, dealing with 200, 300 barrels a day, okay? That's in Indonesia. And there is a couple of recent ones here and there, like in India. I'm sure some of you are aware of it. That's happening in the swamp. You have a difficult access. And on land, right, in terms of land, is happening in Mexico land in 2013. With the spill is the same amount as Macondos. But on land in Mexico, they're able to contain it, and they flow the spill directly to the production facilities. So in terms of the environmental damage, is very, very minimal. Okay, I'm sure it's happened offshore. It's going to create a large spill. So this is what I'm showing you here is that happening in the Western world. I call it Western world, right? So let me just pitch a little bit what happened. Prior 1967 documents, this Popular Mechanics edition, the Soviet Union used the nuclear bomb to put down the well that had been blown out for 3 years in Uzbekistan. And they done that to 8 more wells, okay? So that's we have a different approach in what I call it in the Eastern world, right? Eastern Bloc and Western Bloc. So what I'm showing here is just from the Western Bloc perspective, not from the Eastern side. So let's look at the Macondos. I'm sure you are very familiar. You read the report. As I mentioned before, this is one of the largest, the worst disaster in the history of oil and gas, okay? So we lost 11 lives, right? And then create the largest spill, and then create a tremendous financial exposure, especially for BP. As per public domains that I gather, is cost around 80 billion year to date. Okay, so that's alone cost of BP. How about with the rest of the service company, the rest of oil company, the rest of the the food chains? I estimate probably in the range of 40 billion. Again, I mean, this is just using my numbers, right? If you trust me, okay? So in total for the industry, around 120 billion. So the point I want to say here, it doesn't matter whoever create those. I mean, we as an industry, if we can stop it, that's the best for all of us, right? So the lesson learned, the key lesson learned that I take from the report is the statement saying that if there was unwillingness to take excessive risk, this could be averted or prevented. Okay, the key is excessive risk. If the report is defined excessive risk as the risk and reward is not balanced at all. Okay, so it means the reward is negligible. Okay, as compared to the risk that you're facing. If you keep doing that, the odds for you to happen is very high. I'm sure you guys learn as well if you read the report of this Challenger, for example, right? Incident, Challenger and Colombia, okay? So that's what we should take this learning and for the good of industry, okay? So let me put some outline what I'm trying to, not what I'm going to present here. The first is to manage the relief well, okay? We divided the relief well is complex operation, and we have to divide it into phases that we can easily communicate. And then we use of the management system, the use of management system. The two main things that I like to highlight here is the use collision avoidance standard and hazard and risk control. The reason I'm proposing to use hazard and risk control because it's free of charge, right? Available, you don't need to pay any royalty. Just use it and go for it. And then the second section, I'm going to talk about ranging technology, but this section will be minimal because in the original presentations took 35 minutes, okay? So I will cut down the ranging technology is a very minimum unless you have really question that you can hold, okay? And then we can talk probably side after the presentation or during the presentation. And then we're going to use the real case example, basic land. I'm sure most of you guys not aware that is happening. And this project was classified as what they call it the tide hole, right? However, I'm able to get the release to show it, to share it, and I will not volunteer to tell you the detail unless you ask, okay? So that's the deal. Okay, if you need more information, of course, you can download the ebook. What I'm discussing in the presentation is all about ebook, and this is the work of the well intercept subcommittees. Okay, it's not me alone. Everybody's, any members of here, contributing to this the ebook. And the contents of the ebook, version 3. This is the content. And we are working on the version 4. Hopefully, we're going to get that the version 4 going. But right now, it's a little bit struggle because of the resources we have. But again, I'm going to talk more in detail for the during the report. Okay, and I'd like also to thank the companies for their contribution, individuals, that to make this ebook is possible. I'd like to also thank especially to Halliburton that able to release the document for the ebook, and to the BP for the lesson learned they have on Macondo, and also to Schlumberger for the work project that we did in Mexico. Okay, so there's many trade secrets that you may not aware of it, and there is many documents that Schlumberger planned to patent it, and we decided not to patent it. Okay, just put that in the ebook to release it for the industry. Okay, so let's talk about the relief well and intervention. I'm going to use the two word relief well interceptions at the same time, but with the objective is depend on the objective. Whether when I'm saying relief well, the objective to intercept the blowout well. Okay, so interception well is other than a blowout well. So what is the interception well or relief well here in this example, right? Relief well is the well you drill here as a subject well, as shown in blue, with the main objective to locate, follow, right? To locate, follow the target well as shown in red. And then we're going to create a communication at the interception depth. So basically what we're doing is going to create what I call it the YouTube. Once you maintain the communication and you follow up with the kill operation by pumping sufficient mud weight and volume in order to balance the hydrostatic pressure just slightly above the reservoir pressure to stop the flow. So that's normally, that operation is very critical. We need to get it right. As soon as communication done, so make sure all the thing to follow, right? If we don't have that, Houston, we have a big problem, okay? We don't want to create another relief well. So the way to communicate, there is 4 different techniques, as I just shown you here from your left, right? Communication through formation. If you have a case hole target, so we can use a perforating or use the milling and re-entry. That's a different technique for milling to create communication, and milling re-entry. That's a different, or you do the direct intercept. Okay, these are 4 different techniques that we can do, right? So in terms of the context of the project, is I said before, is very complicated, very challenging. The challenges here, technical complexities. So it means you need to have a team and the people that can do the job. And then the teams require multidisciplinary disciplinary interaction. It's not based on one person expertise. So it means that we need to have a certain protocol and how we're going to communicate each other in the workflow, right? Then the risk, the main thing, just make sure we don't have any HHF risk. So we mean that the risk need to be quantified. The way we're going to quantify it, we use hazard and risk control, okay? And then we have contingency because it's very dynamic operation. The change of the plan from 1 to 2 or 1 to 5 is very dynamic. It could change in the middle of the night, right? So the way we doing this, we have to have everybody on the same page, okay? When we make changes, we use just minimum communication. From 1, now we change to 5, something like that, okay? We don't need to explain what it is because everybody should aware what is 1 mean, what is 2 mean, 3 mean, and so on, okay? And in terms of the people, as I mentioned before, is multidisciplinary. We have technical and non-technical, all right? So non-technicals could be finance people, the CEO or CFO, and in the technical one is a CTO. So we have to work all together. Just so any technical recommendation need to quantify, right? Need to be transparent. Just make sure the risk is minimal, right? The risk is not escalating to the higher level. So in terms of the operation itself, as I mentioned, is very complicated operation. So we like to divide it in by phases. Okay, so into 7 different phases. As you see here, every phase we have action list, right? And we define who is the owner of that process, right? We define who, what, when, and what is the risk, and how you're going to deliver, how you're going to interpret, and so on, right? Everything needs to be transparent. So I just put the 2 different colors here, the blue and red. My intention is to require 2 different expertise, right, to execute this process. So in between 5 and 6, we have more expertise needed, which depend on how you're going to create the communication between the 2 wells. If you want to use milling, you have a different expertise. If you want to use perforating, you have a different expertise, okay? So 5 and 6 is critical, and how we're going to do that. So normally, in most of the operations, we do 2 different options, okay? Whether milling or perforating, or maybe direct intercept, or do the washing, it depends, okay? So that thing need to be discussed. So in terms of the management system, we need to operate with 1 management system, regardless what overall colors you're going to wear, okay? Need to be 1. And we need to have 1 language. We use English as the language, even though I speak Indonesian English, okay? So that's key, right? And then we have a standard. What standard we're going to use? Everybody follow the same standard. So this need to be understand, okay? And use hazard and control, hazard and risk control, and we have the stop. If anything, any of the team member feel the risk is increased, he or she allowed to say stop the operation, and we all going to stop and address that, okay? So in terms of the hazard and risk control, I just want to make sure everybody on the same level here how to assess the risk. The way I define it, the risk is the likelihood of that incident is going to happen multiplied by severities, okay? So make sure everybody are the same, because if you don't put this standard, how you going to quantify the risk? If you talk to the finance, they have a different idea what the risk mean. If you talk to me, I have different idea. So we have to line it up. Just make sure everybody at the same level. So how are we going to use this standard to execute? The first, we use a collision avoidance standard. It's all based on absolute measurement, based on the survey, based on the surface location, right? And we do the simple calculation. As you see, SF, it stands for separation factor. As a function, is defined as center-centered distance divided by the sum of uncertainties. That's it, simple. Okay, you can calculate using your hand or calculator. Okay, and what we said that before you enter 1.2, separation factor less than 1.2, you need to have hazard and risk control in place. So make sure if we have accidental interception or early interception, we can handle the situation, okay? So when we reach a separation factor 1.0, and we're going to do the ranging. But again, you know, you need to have the ranging tool that can range in that distance, okay? If you got the tight EOU, the ranging distance is shorter, right? If you have a larger EOU, the ranging distance is higher, longer. So that's the thing that you have to balance, what technology you're going to use. Once we do the ranging, we're going to switch to use what I call it relative positioning, or relative. So we have to define when the next ranging run we're going to do, which depends on the survey, the position uncertainty we have, and then we make a projection, and then we stop. So that's how we're going to use the collision avoidance and hazard risk control in this operation. Just make sure the risk is always manageable. It will not increase. So if we look at this, the gross error. The gross error is the error that sometimes, not sometimes, is most of the case that you don't consider there's error somewhere in the process, okay? So what I'm proposing is to put a multiple process, what I call it the cross-check methodology, because one team do the same task and the other team do the same task. And then when the two teams meet together, right, under my guidance, just make sure the two teams are giving similar answer. Okay, I don't expect the same answer. If you have the same answer, it means they are cheating each other, okay? That's what the key, okay? That's how I know whether the assessment is good or not. If they are the same, I will ask why is they are the same? Exactly the same, right? So as I just show you here, we have 4 tasks here, but actually I have 27 different tasks that it can be assembled to depend on the activity we have, okay? So that's one of the key things to eliminate the gross error, because the gross error is the dangerous thing that something pop up and you don't consider it, and the risk will escalate it to the higher level very, very quickly, okay? So let's talk a little bit on the ranging. This one I'm going to show, but again, I'm not going to go to too much detail on it, just browse it on the top. So let's look at the ranging. The most common one is, I would say, the passive magnetic ranging, okay, using MWD. And we detect the residual magnetism at the casing joint, okay? So this technique is what I call it the point ranging. If you want to do ranging, you have to stop. You want to do ranging, you have to stop, okay? So that's what mostly the passive magnetic ranging is, access independent, and you don't need to have access to the target well, right? So another part of the magnetic ranging is the active magnetic ranging. So we have access dependent that require access to the other well. So in this example, we use a solenoid on the target well, and we use a rotating magnet to drill the well, okay? So that's access dependent. Whereas access independent, we use the current injection. So this can be done using wire line or you run on the drill pipe, okay? Again, I mean, magnetic ranging is a point ranging at this moment, okay? So that's the on the magnetic part. So we need to consider dependent or independent. In the reliable situation, you have no access to the target well, okay? So you don't have access. So it means current injection that the most appropriate if you want to do magnetic ranging. Okay. So the other technique I'm going to throw here is acoustic ranging. There's a different principle, and access independent. We don't need access to the target well, and done continuously ranging. So we use the technique the same as the seismic section. I mean, the same as seismic logs or seismic section, surface seismic section. In the surface seismic, the difference is larger scale, right? In the acoustic ranging, you use a small scale because you use Warren tool to do this ranging. So it means that the incident angle is very critical. It cannot be larger than 11 degrees, okay? If larger than 11 degrees, I don't have a reflection back from the borehole. So if you want to design really well or interception well that requires two technology, just make sure the trajectory is good for both technique you're going to choose, okay? So we use a commercial Warren tool available everywhere. And what we did is just change the processing and change the acquisition, okay? And what I like to stress, in any ranging that you're going to do, you have to do what I call it the modeling or assessment of the ranging performance. It doesn't matter whether you're going to do with the magnetic, passive magnetic, or active magnetic, or acoustic ranging. You have to do that as a contingency if something goes wrong and you know what the problem is, okay? So that's the thing that I like to really stress the importance of do the simulation or the modeling to understand the performance, operating performance. And the other ranging techniques that's coming in the recently is using what you call it resistivity ranging, okay? So it's access independent using LWD tool. We do it while drilling, okay? So we can transmit the receiver. So the distance, the detection distance is depend on the distance of transmitter and receiver. The good thing about the BHA, we can put as many receiver you want. So you have let's say 120 foot spacing, you can detect 60 feet. If you put 80 foot spacing, you can detect 40 feet, okay? And so on. So with this technique, we provide what I call it redundant measurement, redundant ranging, because each of receiver gives you the data, right? And you have a confidence of the of your ranging result. So we do that at the same time in the same BHA, okay? So that's the on terms of the ranging. And then the next question is, how are you going to decide to do the ranging? So we have to have, you have to ask the questions, is there any value for early detection? Do we need to detect early? Or we can detect later on? I mean, you're going to detect, let's say if you got a Gulf of Mexico, are you going to detect above the salt, right? And then you follow it all the way through the salt and down to the bottom and so on. So that's the thing that we have to have that objective in mind, how we're going to design the trajectory, right? And the risk involved, okay? What is the detection distance that I'm going to have with the technique that we're going to choose, right? And at the same time, can I respond? For example, if I need to change the trajectory, can I do that? Okay. In many cases, I mean, you just plan for the ranging. Yes, you can have a good ranging, but your trajectory will be messed up because we couldn't get back again to follow it, okay? So all these things need to consider. And the way we do it, based on what we learn here, we start from the bottom, what communication technique you're going to use, and we build the trajectory to the top, okay? With all these parameters we have. And again, if you want to do the redundancy ranging, which I really advocate to, so you need to plan the trajectory, make sure it's good for example, if you choose acoustic and active magnetic, both should have the good trajectory that work for both technique, okay? So that's the thing that I really stress. Don't rely on one technique. You can use multiple techniques. Why not? Okay. Why don't you use multiple techniques instead of relying on one? So let me go to the next is the case example here. This is sorry, let me start again. So that's the recordings of this is Clinton's recording. We were there with Clinton's in this project, and basically they parachute me and everybody there, go do it, okay? And I tell you, I mean, the experience is very hard because at that time we couldn't get any lesson learned from Macondos, okay? So we just have to create our own, figure out along the way. So one of the key things before we do anything to understand how many really well we need, right? Is it 1, 2, or 3? So in this example here, I want to highlight this because it's a very around 20,000 barrels per day. So the plan was to use a really well, 2 really well. So what happened if the one of them is not enough to provide a hydraulic kill? What happened? So it means you have to do 3 really well. So instead from 2, it's already complicated, and we have to add 1 more, 3. So this is it's not simple task. We spend a lot of time just to figure out. And at that time, the ranging, we don't have acoustic technology, and we have to do this ranging in the salt, okay? So there is limitation with the active magnetic ranging. We cannot inject the current through the salt. So the only option we have at that time is passive magnetic ranging. So if you use passive magnetic ranging, it means you have to detect all the way up to the top and follow it down deep, okay? So these kind of things that we have to consider. And at the times, we scramble to develop acoustic for this job, okay? So that I like to conclude. First, the risk need to be managed. Make sure the risk is as low as reasonably practical. Okay, that's the key. And we need to have a systematical approach, and we should focus on fit for purpose. When I'm saying fit for purpose, is depend on the activities that you're doing, okay? And what technology you're going to choose. So that's not as simple as we think, but if you have the systematical approach, and we can break down the what I call it, the complicated task to the simple task. So I'd like to open that for Q&A. 26, 25. Mike, you got the phone? Oh, yes, thank you. Sorry.
And the relief wells, you get more than one, I would love to know more about next with this. You get would we want you tying those in above the intersection point?
Yes, we because we got the intersection point here. If you try to put 3 well bore in the same place, that's impossible. So we have to separate by TBDs.
So they're intersecting together to that.
Correct, correct. To create the communication together. 2 must be together. If not enough, the other one should come in. That's correct.
Mike Natural, Pace Setter Directional. I think Benny does really cool to see. I haven't seen too many examples of well reception, so it's really amazing for me. You kind of mentioned it a little bit, but I want to hear a bit more on some of the contingency planning that goes into this, because I mean, in any operation, contingencies are important. Like imagine something as critical as a well intercept. You probably have multiple considerations for that.
Right. For example, we do that contingency planning in the planning stage. Okay, so we have many different scenarios, and then you select what is the good scenario that you're going to execute. Okay, for example, if you like approach, right? Approach may not have the same scenario as locating. Okay, I may change the ranging technique from locating to following. And then, for example, I just showed this acoustic. If I use acoustic, right? And I will lose resolution if the distance less than a foot, because we get so many signal coming in, and we cannot differentiate the noise or the reflection. Okay, if this is casing, and then I will switch to passive or active in that point. Okay, if that's open hole, I'm going to do the washing or caving process. So it means the communications will drive how we're going to do it. So what I'm saying, the contingency here, for example, if I couldn't do, for example, active magnetic, right? What do I have? Passive. What is the next one? Okay. And for example, for milling, I need to have very accurate alignment to mill the casing. Right? So instead of getting headache to align it, why not just blow the whole thing with perforating, right? I can make as many guns lengths I want, right? But the trajectory needs to be changed. I have to be parallel for a long time, right? So this kind of thing, what I'm saying, a contingency, we can start from the communication, what technique we're going to use, and then you go to the top, okay? All the way like that. I don't design from the top. I design from the bottom. What do I need? And then design it, you build it. I know all the software is available in the market is starting from the top, okay, to the bottom. That's the reverse. Build. Thank you.
Just going to add on Bill Allen, VP, on that last bit. I think one of the things we do is that process you just explained, Benny. We look at the trajectory coming into the target well. This is just contingency.
This one? We like that noise. Yeah, we like that noise. We like it. Normally I make it louder, so you can make a real.
I'm just going to add that what we do is we design a drillable trajectory, and then we look at if all the options are on the table, all the ranging techniques are on the table, and the more we have to cross off the list that don't work, eventually get down to nothing. That's a bad day. But we kind of score it internally by how many options are on the table versus how many are off the table. And if we can do everything we want to do, if we have to do it, well, that's a pretty good contingency plan. But if you've got one shot to get it right and it might not work, well, that's not such a good opportunity. And then we do a risk assessment from there. So
that's an excellent approach, right? So, Bill, I really appreciate that. I mean, you go through with all the options and you choose, right? And in some cases, for us, we've been parachuting there, and the well is just in front of you, right? So my thinking is with the team, let's look at what is the good possibilities to success. You start from there, and I start doing the downgrading. Okay, it's different approach. I agree with you. When you do what I call it contingency interception well, I don't call that contingency relief well anymore, because when you said the relief well, they will link to Macondos. Okay, so I call that contingency interception well because it's a plan to do that during that process. That is excellent. We did that with a couple of clients in the Gulf of Mexico to do that. We do the ranking, what technologies we use, trajectory. I think we create more than 1 million trajectory, 1 million tools. I just exaggerate because we spend 6 months probably just to plan that, right? We have plenty of time when we do the contingency interception well. We have plenty of time. When the well is blow out there, you don't have much time. Okay, because we are mostly service provider. So they call us, they said, you need to do it now. Right? But if I have opportunity to plan it ahead, that's the best. I agree with you. That's a good approach. You do that, do the ranking. That's excellent. But you didn't share that with me. No, just kidding. Just kidding. No, VPs have been very nice sharing the lesson from accountants. Okay, I have to give the credit to them. Yep.
Mark Realization Key. Thanks, Benny. I think this is a great discussion of the ways you go about intercepting a well when you need to. I was wondering, since we have some regulators here, could you speak to maybe some considerations of when you're designing a target well to make it interceptable? What makes this job easier when you're building what might become a target well in the future?
That's a very good question. And the way I look at it is just like designing the normal well, right? You have a target, you build a trajectory. And the only thing different is my target is fixed. I call it target well, is in there that I have to hit, right? So that's the difference. That's where the things getting complicated because I will have to deal with contingency because the relief well, I would say when you do the relief well, you have to be successful, right? Failure is not an option. You just can't do it. Right? So in that case, you may have to build, let's say, 6 contingency or 20 contingency, whatever it is. How long will it take? We'll do it. Many people asking me, during the distinguished lecture, how long will it take for you to drill the well? I don't know. I don't have time, okay? But I do have objective to kill that well. So I don't know how long it's going to take. We'll do it to stop it, okay? Not like drilling a normal well. Some people asking, what is your KPI to drill very well? Man, my KPI is to kill that well. Okay. How much it's going to cost? Hey, you guys talk to the CFO, okay? Not to me. So it's a different mindset. That's all I like to pass on. It's a different way of thinking, right? Don't use the standard KPI to drill really well. That's asking for failure. Yeah. Does that answer your question? No? Oh, yes. Very good. Any more question? It's free, okay? It's free. You can ask. Oh, sorry.
So how long did it take you back down?
We do planning quite a long time, and at the end, this was well control able to control at the surface. So the surface intervention.
So they did the surface intervention, not the actual kill?
No, because they're able to do that, and Pemex at that time is happy because the cost of the oil price was $110 per barrel. So don't touch anything, don't kill, let me divert to the production facility. But we only drill the well halfway through. We drill all the well. Okay. We drill the well already.
Okay.
But they said, okay, let's convert the relief well to the production well. Hey, you got $110 per barrel, right? I mean, that is 2.5 million barrels per day cash coming into you. Sorry.
Final point there. Under normal circumstances, under normal circumstances, it's very usual to actually convert
Very well.
the relief well into a production well.
Correct.
Replace the target well.
Correct.
Is destroyed.
Correct. That's true. You are correct. Yeah. I mean, we have a 3, and then we have the convert. Yeah. And the thing is already under control. And the other thing that I want to mention as well to stress this, relief well is just one of the options. But the first thing that you need to do is surface intervention. Okay. But of course, if you said, hey, I'm only doing surface intervention, not relief well, you guys are going to come very hard on us, right?
Yeah, that's the field dressing.
Correct. And so, so we have to do that. I mean, we have one more?
I'm going to slap that thing out of your hand.
Oh, okay. He's going down. Huh? No more? No more. John,
he's the boss.
He's the boss. He's just standing there.
Well, they're all standing back there, too.
Sorry, you asked him.
We'll have Benny's question. You guys can ask questions a little bit later. Next up, we move for the education subcommittee update. Yeah, thanks, Betty.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'll have the Education Subcommittee update for you. I'm Mahmoud Al-Gizawi, KNM Technology Group for Schlumberger. So to remind everybody in the room, this is our mission statement for the Education Subcommittee. And as you might expect, our objective is to raise awareness about the topic within the industry, within the new generation, within anyone that we can reach. So I will touch on the activities that we had, that we've been having recently. The first part, and then the second part, we will talk about the course that we have, the online course that we have, and I'll have Robert to come at the front to give some update on the course, and we have some certificate to hand over to the people, to the students with us here today. So on the activity, recently we had an SPE live. This was pre-ATCE, and this was online on September 19th. David Gibson, the moderator, along with John Hudson from Shell and Ross Loudon from Schlumberger as the speakers, 50 minutes with the title that you see on the screen, How to Drill Reservoir Sections That Drive Lifecycle Value. The objective of this SPE Live to promote the special session that we organized. We'll talk about it in the next slide, that we organized this week at ATCE. So for this online, we had around 80 viewers live and over 100 on the stream. These slides will be online, and you can use this link here if you want to go and see the recording of this SPE Live. It's on this link, which will post, you will find it along the slides later on. So as I said, this SPE Live was promoting this special session, and we held this session on Tuesday this week. We had 4 speakers. The title first is, it's a long title, but it's very descriptive, and I hope you will know what it means here. I'm going to read it out from the slides. How can we define a holistic set of common industry well parameters for reservoir sections that drive life cycle value? We had speakers from different disciplines, different domains, from drilling, from completions, reservoirs, and geology. And each one of them gave their perspective on the topic. We talked about different KPIs between different disciplines and how this can be contradicting. How driller want to drill fast, how the subsurface team, they care more about placing the well in the sweet spot, about the completion, they care about the topography as a whole, where you're going to place the completions, the productions, etc. So this was, it has been moderated again by John Hudson and Ross Loudon, and it was a very successful event. Lastly, to mention about this one, it has been jointly organized along with the drilling system automation technical section. So moving on, as part of our mission statement is raising awareness, and we have a really focus on students. So how to raise an awareness on this topic for students, how to attract young generations that now, as you might expect, it's been very challenging to attract this crowd at the moment. And the effort that we're trying to do, a few things that you see here. We're talking about having the members from the education subcommittee to reach to their universities. Tim Patton volunteered for this one to see, and he's going to reach to his university, and we'll see how can we reach out to the SPE student sections and the other undergraduate on this. The raising awareness even for high school. Roger Estes was suggesting that we need to even reach out to high schools, and we're looking and brainstorming on ways to do it and to achieve this reach to the high school students. These are all wishful thinking and activities that we will embrace for the future. But now the ones that we're already involved in, robotics and Petrobol and the distinguished lecture already described by Vinny. On the robotics competition, this is an international competition for universities to have the students to build the rig, to build like a rock sample. And it's split into two groups. One group will do it on a simulation, and the other one will do an actual rig, as you see in the picture, and trying to use like sensors and use like try to model the rig with the sensor in order to drill in this concrete block. So we've been sponsoring this competition for the last 2 years, and we are planning to continue to sponsor it for this coming year. It starts right now. The requirements are out for the students out there. The requirements is out there. We're looking for volunteers from the committees, and we have a handful of members that are willing to volunteers. David Gutierrez, he's been our contact mainly for along with the DSAT on this, along with Robert Estes, to get us involved. So now we're looking for judges from the team, and we have already 4 volunteers, David, Robert, Tim, and Harold Bolt. We are kindly willing to devote their time and effort to volunteer as the judges, where they have to, and there is a guidelines already, we have it distributed. And David Gibson as well as volunteering on the documentary for this competition, thankfully. So we're putting a lot of efforts on this one. The final request is having short videos on the directional surveys, and this is we're looking into catering this request to the competition. David, you want to add something here? And then the other activity that we have is the Petrobol. And Petrobol, if you guys not aware of it, this is a competition between SPE student chapters where they compete against each other's answering questions and quizzes. It's done once a year at ATCE, and it has been held this week, I think Monday or Tuesday, I believe Monday. So now we want to include some questions from our domain, from the well-board positioning, and this request is for all of you guys to send questions. There is a link that you see here to submit the questions. It will be live as soon as we upload the slides. You can go there, you can click on the link, and there is a form. You put the question that you think might be interesting. It has to be very simple, answer yes or no, just one word. Very basic understanding is just to get the students interested in the well-board position. Distinguished lecturer program, I will not talk about it much, already been talked by Vinny. Thankfully, he's been reaching out to a lot of student chapters, SPE student chapters, and getting the word out. It's been really, really great, and thank you so much for this. Moving on to the ebook updates. The ebook, we have 2 ebooks out, and the third one is work in progress, and the third one is a survey QC, and it's an effort by the subcommittee of the survey QC. It's still work in progress at the moment. We're looking into changing the update the cover for the ebook. It has the logo of the University of Highlands and Islands, which is not involved anymore. So it's something that we will do. And just to let everybody know that we have a PDF version and we have an online version where you can just browse it online and you can submit your comments. It will come to us and we'll work on it. We're always out to update the contents of the ebook. If you have any topic you think it might be interesting, if you see some materials that is outdated, needs to be updated, please let us know. Either send me an email or send to Angus Jamison on this one, or even in the web version, you can, on the page itself, you can just put a comment there and it will come to us. Finally, before I turn it over to Robert, I'd like to acknowledge our members. We had 17 participants in the meeting yesterday. Thanks to every and each one of them for all the effort and activities. Special thanks to Carol for taking the notes and effort and everything. And finally, we'll talk about the course update, and need Robert to come over to update us on this.
Any questions about you before we move on? Let's go here. Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to say it's great to see so many contributors to the course, so many current students and so many former students on the course, either in here in person or online. I'm going to give you a slight update, a little bit here, introduction to those of you who don't know what the thing is. We took over the book from UHI a couple of years ago, and we converted it into an EDX format, which is what's used by people like Microsoft, MIT, IBM, and many big operations. And we have that running on our own training server under the ISCWSA website. So instead of a series of very, very long video lectures, it now includes a series of short video lectures, readings, problems, exercises, and examples. And we're using, rather than using a final examination, we're using continuous assessment. So each module is an assessment at the end of the week, and there's a bigger test towards the end of the whole course. We do the registration through our own website, of course, and like I said, it runs on our own training center server. I just put the contents up here for people who aren't so familiar with it. Basically, the idea is it's called Introduction to Wellbore Positioning. Sometimes we get in quite deep in different topics, but that depends on the students and the tutorials. We have tutorials once a week, typically, and they're usually run in 2 different time zones. They're run in 2 different times, typically 10 o'clock in the UK in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon in the UK in the morning. The 10 o'clock one is geared more towards east of Greenwich, and the 4 o'clock one is kind of west of Greenwich. But we sometimes have students on those tutorials from 4 different continents, like South America, North America, Asia, and Australia, with Angus as a tutor in the middle as well. So it's quite an open thing there. The tutorials are not compulsory, but they are highly recommended. I think some of the students that are here will probably tell you that there's some stuff comes up in there that, with Angus, of course, it gets quite entertaining at times. But it's participatory rather than recorded and sent out afterwards. Of course, those are run by Angus, who flies in occasionally. The way to join, there's more on the website, our webpage here, main webpage here. There's the About the Course piece there, which gives you more information about the contents of the course in detail. It goes, like the previous slide says, everything from mapping and geodesy through magnetics, MWD tools, different survey tools, corrections, database management, to relief well type stuff, high accuracy drilling, and survey corrections. There's quite a lot contained in the course. The way to participate in the course is then to click the Apply Now button, which takes you to a page where you can actually register your interest in the course for a particular time of course. After that, we manage that intake to make sure that the people that are applying, we've got a nice spread of students in a particular group, and we don't have too many to handle in a particular cohort. And those are the main things there. This is just about, that's the Apply Now, that's the About the Course thing here. It just tells you more about it. It gives a little example of one of the pages, early pages, and goes from there. The course costs $1,200. We initially were targeting, as Ryan pointed out, we were targeting a slightly lower fee than that, but the way we want to run it very professionally, we feel that the prices had to go up a little bit more. And we've also had feedback from some of our customers saying, you're not charging anywhere near enough for this. So we said, that's fine, thank you very much, we'll charge a little bit more. But it's a major operator who are committed, and they already have that in their course, their own internal training course book. So we're getting feedbacks from them to go there. Typically, the course takes about 10 weeks, 12 weeks. It's a 8-week module course. We issue one module a week kind of thing, allow 3 weeks for that module to be completed, which means that people that are working on a 2 on, 2 off, or 2 on, 1 off schedule or anything like that can still fit in the coursework if they assign the time to it properly and hit tutorials and things too without being compressed to having to hit a schedule to try and fit into a already busy work schedule. It's the videos, easy navigation. There's a transcript to the side. So instead of having to go back to try and find a particular point by scrolling a bar, you can just go and click on the language at the side here, the word that you want, it will take you to that point in the video if you want to review things. And certainly when I was going through some of the stuff, I had to review some things several times. I could go back and click on that word and wear it out. That's about a quick summary of what's going on there. Currently, we are got the third group or cohort of students going through the course. It started in September and will run through to December with 23 students on 4 different continents currently involved. The first cohort ran from September the 21st, September 2021 to January 22, with 11 of those students graduating. A couple of those were there to really find out more about the course, to pass that on to their own internal colleagues and things like that. And a couple have dropped back to cohort 2 and then went through and ran and passed the cohort 2. Cohort 2 started in February, went through June, and we had 10 out of those 14 graduated. We've already got 23 in the current course, which is halfway through, and we've another course planned to start in January with several students already lined up for that. So it's coming on quite well. One of the things I really want to do here is make sure that the students who have graduated from this course are acknowledged and it's recorded. So this is the list of students who have completely graduated from the course and now hold the ISCWSA certificate, Introduction to Wellbore Positioning. You can see there's different names. So there's a couple of people from the Middle East there, a couple of people from Europe, a couple of people from North America, South America. Mostly in these groups is mostly those areas. And let's say we currently have people from Australia, Canada, India, Saudi Arabia, and I think maybe Emirates as well. So it's quite a widespread group. And it is picking up pace. I think Pete asked a question yesterday, what's the uptake? You can see that we're starting to build the interest, and as people grab onto that, and we're getting some very good feedback, I think, from the students. So several of those students are here in the room today. I don't think Teddy's here. Is Teddy here? No. But if David, Josh, Joel, Mike, and Kevin would like to go up to the front, please. And anybody else I've missed on the list here that's in part of that group, are they here? Have I missed anybody? Please congratulate them all. So, actually, I was going to ask each of them before they got the certificate if they could explain the XMRY 1-2 thing that were anywhere earlier on, because I'd love to know more about it.
All right.
But yeah, so yeah, and we have 4 people here. So I'll pass this on to, I'll just put this down. Where's Joel? Joel was supposed to be here today. Okay, secret mission. Anyway, let me pass these across one at a time. And so Kevin, your name's on top because being a WY, I like starting at the end of the alphabet. So congratulations, Kevin. Mike cheated a bit actually, because Mike was also helped us out a lot in the early days in terms of doing some trial runs and bits and pieces of stuff. So he went through the whole thing. Joel's not here. Josh. And finally, not last but not least, David. And maybe Carol, could you take a picture of Mahmoud and the students with the certificates here? That'd be great. Let me go across the other end.
You got the chairs in the way, so we can pick one outside too, but. All right, geez.
Best cheerleader positions.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, good job, guys. Thank you.
Thank
Well done.
Thank you, well done. I'm not sure if you have any questions before we head off to lunch. Actually, lunch is going to be here, just a bit outside. Any questions to the education subcommittee? Any comments you'd like to add? All right. If not, thank you so much.
Yeah, so we're gonna break for lunch, and then we'll be starting back at 5 after. Lunch will be eaten in here, on your tables, because, when we come back, we're gonna do membership chair with Mark. And then after that, we will be doing elections. If you want to educate yourself before you vote, which is probably a good idea, there are pieces of paper on each one of the tables with information about all of the candidates.
And just the other thing that we have as a rule is, just to be fair, only 3 people per company to be voting. So if you have a large group here, more than 3, just arrange between yourself and designate 3 people to vote. So you keep it fair and it's not just filtered to the vote company too.
SPE members only to vote.
And yes, and SPE members in the good standing are allowed to vote. We're not going to take that, but hope that that's clear. Enjoy your lunch.